Bluebird. So, we'll see. Okay, start recording. There we go. Sorry, I forgot to press the record button. So, let's start again. Okay, welcome. And this is Briar Rose. A king and queen, once upon a time, reigned in a country a great way off, where there were in those days fairies. Now this king and queen had plenty of money, and plenty of fine clothes to wear, and plenty of good things to eat and drink, and a coach to ride out in every day. But though they had been married many years, they had no children, and this grieved them very much indeed. But one day, as the queen was walking by the side of the river, at the bottom of the garden, she saw a poor little fish that had thrown itself out of the water and lay gasping and nearly dead on the bank. When the queen took pity on the poor little fish and threw it back again into the river, and before it swam away, it lifted its head out of the water and said, "I know what your wish is, and it shall be fulfilled. In return for your kindness to me, you will soon have a daughter." What the little fish had foretold soon came to pass, and the queen had a little girl, so very beautiful that the king could not cease looking on it for joy, and said he would hold a great feast and make merry, and show the child to all the land. So he asked his kinsmen, and nobles, and friends, and neighbors. But the queen said, "I will have the fairies also, that they might be kind and good to our little daughter." Now there were 13 fairies in the kingdom, but as the king and queen only had 12 golden plates and dishes for them to eat out of, they were forced to leave out one of the fairies without asking her. So 12 fairies came, each with a high red cap on her head, and red shoes with high heels on her feet, and a long white wand in her hand. And after the feast was over, they gathered round in a ring and gave all their best gifts to the princess. One gave her goodness, another beauty, another riches, and so on until she had all that was good in the world. Just as 11 of them had done blessing her, a great noise was heard in the courtyard, and word was brought that the 13th fairy was come, with a black cap on her head, and black shoes on her feet, and a broomstick in her hand. And presently up she came into the dining hall. Now as she had not been asked to the feast, she was very angry, and scolded the king and queen very much, and set to work to take her revenge. So she cried out, "The king's daughter shall in her 15th year be wounded by a spindle and fall dead." Then the 12th of the friendly fairies, who had not yet given her gift, came forward and said that the evil wish must be fulfilled, but that she could soften its mischief. So her gift was that the king's daughter, when the spindle wounded her, should not really die, but should only fall asleep for 100 years. However, the king hoped still to save his dear child altogether from the threatened evil. So he ordered that all the spindles in the kingdom should be bought up and burnt. But all the gifts of the first 11 fairies were in the meantime fulfilled. for the princess was so beautiful and well behaved and good and wise that everyone who knew her loved her. It happened that, on the very day she was 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and she was left alone in the palace. So she roved about by herself and looked at all the rooms and chambers, till at last she came to an old tower, to which there was a narrow staircase, ending with a little door. In the door there was a golden key, and when she turned it in, the door sprang open, and there sat an old lady spinning away very busily. "Why, how now, good mother," said the princess, "what are you doing there?" "Spinning," said the old lady, and nodded her head, humming a tune, while buzz went the wheel. "How prettily that little thing turns round," said the princess, and took the spindle and began to try and spin. But scarcely had she touched it before the fairy's prophecy was fulfilled. The spindle wounded her, and she fell down lifeless on the ground. However, she was not dead. She had only fallen into a deep sleep. And the king and queen, who had just come home, and all their court, fell asleep too. And the horses slept in the stables, and the dogs in the court, the pigeons on the housetop, and the very flies slept upon the halls. Even the fire on the hearth left off blazing, and went to sleep. The jack stopped, and the spit was turning about with a goose upon it for the king's dinner, stood still, and the cook, who was at that moment pulling the kitchen boy by the hair to give him a box on the ear for something he had done amiss, let him go, and both fell asleep. The butler, who was slyly tasting the ale, looked back, fell asleep with the jug at his lips. And thus everything stood still and slept soundly. A large hedge of thorns soon grew round the palace, and every year it became higher and thicker, till at last the old palace was surrounded and hidden, so that not even the roof or the chimneys could be seen. But there went a report through all the land of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose, for so the king's daughter was called, so that from time to time several kings' sons came and tried to break through the thicket into the palace. This, however, none of them could ever do, for the thorns and bushes laid hold of them, as it were with hands, and where they stuck fast and died wretchedly. After many, many years, there came a king's son into that land, and an old man told him the story of the thicket of thorns, and how a beautiful palace stood behind it, and how a wonderful princess, called Briar Rose, lay in it asleep. with all her court. He told, too, how he had heard from his grandfather that many princes had come and had tried to break through the thicket, but they had all stuck fast in it and died. Then the young prince said, "All this shall not frighten me. I will go and see this Briar Rose." The old man tried to hinder him, but he was bent upon going. Now that very day, the 100 years were ended, and as the prince came to the thicket, he saw nothing but beautiful flowering shrubs, through which he went with ease, and they shut in after him as thick as ever. Palace. And there in the court lay the dogs asleep, and sat the pigeons fast asleep, and the horses were standing in the stables, with their heads under their wings. Pigeons, I mean. And when he came into the palace, the flies were sleeping on the walls, the spit was standing still, the butler had a jug of ale at his lips, going to drink a draught. The maid sat with a fowl in her lap, ready to be plucked, and the cook in the kitchen was still holding up her hand, as if she were going to beat the boy. Then he went still on further, and all was so still that he could hear every breath he drew, till at last he came to the old tower, and opened the door of the little room in which Briar Rose was, and there she lay, fast asleep on a couch by the window. She looked so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her, so he stooped down and gave her a kiss. But the moment he kissed her, she opened her eyes and awoke, and smiled upon him. And they went out together, and soon the king and queen also awoke, and all the court, and gazed on each other with great wonder. And the horses shook themselves, and the dogs jumped up and barked. The pigeons took their heads from under their wings, and looked about and flew into the fields. The flies on the wall buzzed again, and the fire in the kitchen blazed up. Round went the jack, and round went the spit, and the goose for the king's dinner upon it. The butler finished his draught of ale, the maid went on plucking the fowl, and the cook gave the boy the box on his ear. And then the prince and Briar Rose were married, and the wedding feast was given, and they lived happily together all their lives long. Certainly not the version Disney made. Okay. Let's double check this. So 13:42. Okay. Alright, so how are y'all doing? I don't know if anybody's watching. It tends to be a little slow in letting me know when someone's watching. So did you give up? I mean, it goes fine for a little bit. Okay, so thank you for the like. I just have to get back to public posts. Let's look at that. Facebook does not make it easy to go back and see what the heck you're doing, so let's see. So I've done that. really, really frustrated with Facebook. Really, really frustrated. New messages. Okay. And there's the link. Yeah, it kind of slumped out after 5 seconds. Okay, I want to stop Facebook. I'm really, really not happy with you at this point. Stop it. You know what? Let's go to Facebook directly. I mean, YouTube directly, which is in productivity. Your channel. Okay, there we go. Okay. Sorry to make you all listen to this. Okay. Alright. Now at 16. Yeah, 14 minutes left. I'm gonna do that. Stop it. Let's cause the issue here. Let's just get out the Facebook period. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, that probably is one of the issues. So, okay. So, okay, we've got the golden bird, we've got the fisherman and his wife, and then there's the frog prince. So, I hope everybody enjoyed that version of Briar Rose. There wasn't any dragons involved in that particular version. But